Hey guys, what is up? It is me, Pagey, here once again with another video on The Flash, Season 8. So we know that The Flash is currently about 2 or 3 weeks roughly into filming for Season 8, but of course, the first 5 episodes for this season will be this Armageddon 5-part event. Not a crossover, but a crossover at the same time. But they don't want to confirm it as a crossover, that will feature Despero as the villain for those episodes, along with a bunch of guest stars from across the Arrowverse showing up to help Barry and Team Flash deal with this, new alien mega threat. But after that, what is next? Who is next up on the villainous side for the show? Now, we have had various teasers for the threats this season, with one tease being that a villain will lean into the horror genre of sorts, maybe similar to what Stargirl is doing this season with Eclipso. But Despero doesn't really fall into that category, in my opinion, of his comic character. He looks scary, but in my opinion, he's an alien threat, he's not horror. And they can make him fall into that horror category, but I don't think they will. So it seems that tease for a horror sort of feel was for another villain showing up, and thanks to TV Line, we may have just got another tease for that particular villain that's being teased coming later in Season 8. But of course, throughout the video, there's a couple of different things here, so I'm very curious to hear what you guys think, so let me know in the comment section down below. Now, obviously, it is important to remember that Eric Wallace, the showrunner for The Flash, said that a villain that was supposed to be in the opening scene of Season 6, not last season, but Season 6, who was then replaced by Godspeed, will be showing up in Season 8. Now, we have no idea whether that is going to be a main threat or just a one-episode villain. Maybe that random villain that in that opening scene for Season 6 was meant to be Despero. Unlikely, but it's a chance. But yeah, just keep that in mind going into Season 8, but I don't think that villain is the villain that is being teased in this piece from TV Line. But in regards to that piece from TV Line, this was in their spoiler scoop Q&A segment thing that they run. And yeah, I'll leave a link in the description down below if you want to go check out all the different spoilers they have for a bunch of different shows, or scoops, might I say. Not necessarily spoilers, but scoops for a bunch of different shows. Yeah, there'll be a link in the description down below if you want to go check it out. But Steven, shout out to Steven, asked this question. Anything on Flash villains after the Armageddon aliens? And this is how TV Line responded. Well, as previously reported, showrunner Eric Wallace told me that one of the upcoming nemesis will be the biggest and most powerful villain the Flash has yet faced, and would appear quite early in Season 8. So maybe he was referring to the 5-part Armageddon event, which would be Despero, and I think that's what he's referring to there. But I will now also share that Eric Wallace teased another new villain that will force Team Flash to face their mortality in a highly personal and ultimately terrifying way. So yeah, that was a pretty interesting question. So thanks, Steven, if you're out there. And just an answer from TV Line, and just the Eric Wallace quote in general. And it now opens the door as to who the hell the Season 8 villain could be, following Despero after the first 5 episodes for this season. Now, it could be any villain from the comics that the Flash hasn't touched, if not just use another villain and do them again, because that villain could just be altered to fit that description that was given. But if you are picking a villain to fit that description, that's when you start, to really only have a couple or a few choices to pick from. Now, I know that when you hear or read highly personal, a lot of people's minds go straight to either 2 choices for something that hasn't been on the show or could, still be put on the show. The first being Reverse Flash, but that won't be the villain here. I think if they would just say it's Reverse Flash, in my opinion, if that's going to be the case. And of course, the other option is Eddie Thawne as Cobalt Blue. But the other parts in that description of the villain make me lean mainly to one choice, which most people online, after hearing or reading this quote, pointed to and went, him, I think it's him. Though I do have another choice that could be a somewhat cool villain if it isn't the main choice for this video, and I'll mention them a bit later in the video. But of course, that main choice that everyone is pointing at going, oh my god, they must be referring to that, is that of Red Death. Now in the comics, as we know, or most of you would know, Red Death is an amalgamation of a wicked Bruce Wayne, or evil Bruce Wayne, or Batman, and Barry Allen, or the Flash, which is a pretty deadly combination of skills, especially when the motivation is pushed towards villainous things. Now on the show, this combination is very unlikely. I think it's actually better that they don't use an amalgamation of Bruce and Barry. If anything, neither of them needs to be involved. Red Death should be someone or something else completely, but we'll come back to that later. Now, when we look at the quote from Eric Wallace, the main words to relate to whoever the villain could be are mortality, personal, and terrifying. Those are the 3 words to focus in on. Now, the first and last word of mortality and terrifying sort of go together, as mortality is like the risk of death pretty much, and the risk of death is pretty terrifying, especially if it's a high risk of death. Now, throwing back to previous seasons as a reference point to support something happening in a current or later season isn't always the most supportive point with TV shows, whether it's The Flash or whether it's, I was going to say The Bachelor, but I don't know, some random ass show. And that's just because things change, creatives change, plans change, everything like that. However, we of course had the shout out to Red Death for the first, and I think only time on the show. There might have been another time, but I think this was the main one that everyone would remember. And this was back in season 5 when we visited the Flash Museum in the future. I think it was with Nora. Anyway, we visited the Flash Museum where we learned some stuff about everyone's favorite villain, Cicada. But one thing that was dropped was that Cicada went on to kill more people than Red Death. So in that future, Red Death supposedly is number 2 on the all-time kills leaderboard. Not sure who was updating that leaderboard. But as we know, Cicada was taken out in the present day and unable to continue that and I guess reach number 1. So bit of an L for Cicada there. So surely that means Red Death should be the number 1 on the leaderboard. Leaderboard sounds really bad when talking about kills, but that's just the best way to put it. And the events with Red Death happened before Nora came back from the future in 2049. I think it was when she was little as well. So he shows up between now and then I guess like pretty soon, like I guess like the next 10 years. So does that first appearance leading up to that top of the table leaderboard kill streak, does that now happen in season 8, that first appearance? Now, I've probably brought this up before when talking about Red Death in the past, probably back in season 5 when he was first name dropped. But Red Death in the comics, obviously, was able to kill people in a pretty quick fashion due to the ability to infect people with super fast increased aging, essentially. So they would age thousands of years in an instant, so they just withered to dust pretty much. So on the show, they wouldn't have to have him going around phasing through people's chests or heads or snapping necks like Zoom did. They could and honestly should just do this infection thing if they're going to keep him as this like wild murderer. As it visually would be pretty crazy to see as well. It might get old somewhat quickly, but if we know that's just how he's killing a lot of people and why he's such a threat, it would be pretty insane. And once again, it would fit into those descriptive words used by Eric Wallace of mortality and terrifying, because if he's doing this, can infect people pretty easily, yeah, the mortality rate is pretty high when Red Death is around, and it'd be pretty terrifying. But there is another word to focus in on, and a pretty important one in regards to motives for what Red Death could be doing, as well as how it impacts Team Flash, or specifically Barry, and of course that word is personal. Now, coming back to that whole amalgamation of Bruce Wayne and Barry Allen with Red Death from the comics, as I said, it's unlikely to happen on the show, and I think it would be better if it wasn't, because there is zero, zilch, nada connection between the two in the Arrowverse, unlike in the comics, there's a big connection there. So Red Death should be somebody else. Now, I did bring up Eddie Thawne as Cobalt Blue early on, who is, of course, another villain that many, including myself, want to see. Now, they could make Eddie Thawne Red Death, and while that is a change that could annoy some people, if maybe a lot of people, I'm not too sure, I don't think it changes a crazy amount, as long as the motivations for Eddie are the same as, it would be with Cobalt Blue, as he is if he is Red Death. So for Eddie, his motivations are just revenge on Barry Allen for pretty much stealing his life, or at the very least, living what he envisioned his life to be. I'm not saying like Eddie wanted to be the Flash, but I'm saying Eddie with Iris, hero of Central City, everything like that, like actually having a legacy, which Reverse Flash in season 1, or, Eddie Thawne or Eddie's far descendant said, yeah, no one really remembers you, mate. No one thinks you were all that. Everyone sort of forgot about you fairly quickly, which, got to Eddie pretty deep. So if they made Eddie into Red Death and just did a random storyline not attached to any of that revenge, it would be pointless. And then that would be very upsetting for viewers and myself. I think I might cry. But who could be Red Death? If it isn't a combo of Bruce and Barry, or it's not Eddie Thawne, who is it? Well, there's a couple of choices here. I've actually written down 4. I think there's only... I don't know. I guess it depends on what you think. So I'm very curious to hear what you would say in response to these. And if you have another creation of who you think Red Death could be, let me know in the comments section down below. But I've got 4 here. The first one is Bloodwork mixed with Speed Force. This is one that a lot of people want. I don't know if it's the top one, but it's one that I've seen a lot of people saying it would make sense. Like, you think Red Death, you think Blood, you think Bloodwork, just mixed with some Speed Force energy. He's already, like, I guess, a metahuman, so that would work. You'd have to think so. And it'd be a pretty scary villain. I mean, imagine if they had like Speed Force powers mixed with Bloodwork. He could like absorb stuff. It would be pretty crazy and pretty scary. So Bloodwork mixed with Speed Force, I think, would be actually a pretty decent option for Red Death. And they left the door open with Bloodwork. He's not finished. They obviously have plans to do something with him. Is it Red Death? I don't know. Next one is something that maybe people suggested years ago or seasons ago, even before maybe Red Death was even mentioned, but they could bring it back here, and that's a multiversal Wally West or a multiversal West, West family member, and it could be a play on the Daniel West Reverse Flash from the comics. So Daniel West, I think was it Wally's dad? I think it was Wally's dad. So this is like Iris's other nephew, so it was Iris's brother, I think. From memory, I'm just trying to go off the top of my head. There's been a lot of Flash stuff, so I'm pretty sure it's Iris's brother and Wally's dad. Daniel West became a Reverse Flash, in a pretty creepy way, and he's a pretty creepy character. So they could do a play on that. Not necessarily this is their take on the Daniel West Reverse Flash, but it could be a hint saying, "Hey, we never got to do that," but then we'll just use this like multiverse Wally West, or a multiverse West or something like that. Maybe played by Keenan Lonsdale. I'm not too sure. That is like a Red Death sort of mock-up for the show. I think that'd be fairly cool, and also would add like a personal factor because it's a multiverse version of Iris's brother and Barry's brother-in-law and Joe's son. It'd be very, very personal to the core of the show, so that could actually really work really well. I chucked this in there because I know people have mentioned it. I don't necessarily think it's even that high of a chance, but I thought I'd chuck it in here because I think people would comment it anyway. And that's Kate Kane, or former Batwoman with Speed Force. I mean, Kate Kane on Batwoman is alive. She went away. Once again, could be another multiverse version. Why would she be evil? I guess if it's this Earth's version. So I'm not too sure. There's a couple of different multiverse options here, to be completely honest. But Kate Kane with Speed Force, I guess, would be like a play on a Bat family member, that's evil with Speed Force. I don't necessarily think it's that high of a choice, but I thought I'd chuck it in here anyway. And the final one is one that I think would be big fan service and a bit of a meme at the same time, just because everyone says, "Oh, this is the Batman of the Arrowverse anyway." And this is a corrupted multiversal Oliver Queen. Obviously, Oliver Queen, quote unquote, died, became the Spectre, everything like that. So I don't think it would be that. So if he came back and was like a Red Death, if Stephen Amell played that, it'd have to be a multiversal version. And it could be some weird thing where, imagine this like story, he got trapped on the island, but the island had Speed Force energy on it or something like that, or he touched a lightning bolt or was struck by lightning on there. Maybe there's a crash ship with chemicals, got struck by lightning in the middle of the island. I'm not too sure. Some corrupted multiversal Oliver Queen being Red Death, I think would be probably the most epic fan service in regards to all of this, just because you would have Stephen Amell playing a villain on The Flash. That's a big ask because he is on another TV show, but it obviously they could work it out, especially that now the border restrictions aren't a thing with COVID, like they can sort of just fly in and out anyway. So they could make it work, especially if there's a mask the entire time. And yeah, as I said, I think that'd be like the most epic fan service in regards to Red Death if they're doing Red Death. But yeah, that'd be pretty cool to see. But yeah, the other option as a villain, we're done with Red Death. The other option that could be there, and I think I mentioned this guy before in like one other video, but didn't really elaborate, that's Brother Grimm. That's the other choice that they could lean into here. He is like magic based, who can sort of predict movements of Speed Force users. So he'd be a pretty hard villain to face because he can sort of predict anyone that's got a Speed Force's next move. And the magic aspect could lean into the horror genre as well and cause a lot of damage. I don't see the personal aspect with him unless for some reason he's connected, which I think would be forced and overly forced. At least I don't see how there could be a personal connection there. You might be able to and unravel and explain it to me. But yeah, that's another option. But I think if you're going to go off this Eric Wallace quote, I think there's only two probable options if we're taking this quote word for word and it actually means something. And that's probably Red Death or Cobalt Blue. And I think everything that's said there, leans more into Red Death. Let's cross our fingers. Not long to go until we'll probably find out what's going on. But yeah, guys, thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, it'd be awesome if you could drop a like on it, show support. Let me know in the comment section down below your various opinions on all this. Thoughts on the Red Death stuff. Who do you want to be Red Death? Would you like to see him? Everything like that. Let me know in the comment section down below. And of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. And I'll catch you guys later. And goodbye.